I raised them. I loved them. And somehow, 30 years later, I was sitting in a holding cell in Kamloops being treated like a criminal. Let me back up. My name is Harold, and I am 67 years old. I spent 32 years working for BC Hydro out of their Kamloops district office, mostly doing line maintenance and crew supervision in the Thompson-Okanagan region. My wife, Joanne, passed from ovarian cancer in 2011. After that, it was just me, the house on Tranquil Road, and whatever was left of the family I thought I knew. My son is the one who started all of this. His name is Spencer. And I'm not ashamed to say that even now, after everything, I still love him. But love does not mean I pretend what he did was acceptable. It was not. Spencer was 34 when he showed up at my door the first time. He had his girlfriend with him, a woman named Tara, and 2 children I had never met. A boy, 6 years old, and a girl who had just turned 4. The boy's name was Eli. The girl was Rosie. I remember thinking the kids looked exhausted, not tired the way children get after a long car ride, exhausted the way children get when no one has been paying attention to them. Spencer told me he needed a favor, said he and Tara had a situation with housing, that things had gotten complicated, that it would only be a few weeks until they sorted themselves out. He was speaking quickly the way he always did when he was lying, that same nervous pace he had since he was a teenager. I told him the children were welcome to stay as long as they needed. He left the next morning while the kids were still asleep. Tara had already been gone by midnight. I found the note on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. It said, "Dad, I know this isn't fair. I'm sorry. I'll be in touch." That was it. No phone number, no forwarding address. Just those 2 sentences and a signature I had taught him to write when he was 7 years old. I stood in my kitchen in my socks at 6 in the morning reading that note 4 times. Then I heard Rosie calling from the guest room, asking where her dad was. And I put the note in my shirt pocket and went to make her breakfast. I would not hear from Spencer for 3 weeks. When he finally called, it was brief. He said he and Tara were in a bad spot, that it was better for the kids to be with me, that he would get back on his feet soon. I asked him directly, "Are you using?" He paused too long before saying no. I told him I was enrolling the children in school here in Kamloops, and that they would have beds and food and everything they needed for as long as that took. He said, "Thank you, Dad." He sounded relieved in a way that broke my heart a little. That was 11 years ago. Illy is 17 now. Rosie just turned 15. I took them to Costco on her birthday, and she picked out one of those enormous stuffed pandas and carried it through the whole store, absolutely delighted with herself. That is who she is. That is who I watched her become. I will not pretend the first couple of years were easy. I was 61, recently widowed, and suddenly raising a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old on a pension and modest retirement savings. I had to restructure everything. I called Service Canada and eventually connected with a caseworker who helped me apply for the Canada Child Benefit on the kids' behalf. I got custody formalized through BC Family Court, not because I wanted a fight, but because the school and the doctor's office needed proper documentation. The family court judge in Kamloops was a quiet woman who looked at my paperwork and asked me very gently if I had any support. I told her I had my neighbor, Ted. No, not Ted. His name was Rupert, a retired teacher who lived 3 houses down and used to help with pickups when I had a long drive for work. The judge said I was doing the right thing. That helped more than I expected. Spencer called maybe 4 times in the first year, then twice the year after, then once on Christmas, drunk, crying, saying he missed the kids. I told him the kids missed him too, and that there would always be a place for him at the table if he got clean. He hung up. I sat in the kitchen for a while after that, and then went back to helping Eli with his science project. After the 3rd year, the calls stopped entirely. The children asked about him less and less as time went on. Not because they forgot. You do not forget a parent, but because they had moved from hoping into something quieter, something more settled. Eli especially. He is a serious kid, methodical, good with his hands. He started helping me with small repairs around the house when he was 12. Last summer he rebuilt my back fence almost entirely on his own. He would not let me help. He said he wanted to do it himself. I have a friend named Gord, not Gordon, Gord. He hates being called Gordon. We have known each other since we were both in our 20s, working out of the same hydro depot in Merritt. He is the kind of man who shows up. When Joanne was sick, he drove 2 hours from Salmon Arm every other weekend just to sit with me and watch hockey. When Spencer left the kids, Gord was the first person I called. He did not say much when I told him. He just said, "Okay, what do you need? That is Gord." Over the next 11 years, he became an uncle to those children, as far as I was concerned. He came for Christmas and Thanksgiving and random weekends, when he just felt like making his chili and watching the Canucks lose. Eli and Rosie called him Uncle Gord without anyone telling them to. It just happened. I did not think about Spencer often after the 5th year. I thought about the version of him I was still hoping existed somewhere. The version that might walk through the door clean and sorry and ready. But the man himself felt like a stranger I had once known. I kept his number in my phone. I never deleted it. I told myself that was for the kids, in case they wanted it someday. Then, 11 years after he left those 2 exhausted children on my doorstep, Spencer came back. I was in the backyard when Eli came out and told me there was a man at the front door saying he was his father. Eli's voice was completely flat. That flatness scared me more than anything. I went around the side of the house and Spencer was standing on my porch. He looked older than I expected. Thinner. He was wearing a dress shirt that was slightly too new, the way people dress when they want to look like they have things together. There was a woman standing just behind him on the path, and a man in a gray jacket who I did not recognize. I said hello to Spencer. He did not hug me. He said, "Dad, this is my wife, Cheryl, and this is our solicitor, Mr. Bassett." I felt the whole world tilt slightly. Bassett handed me an envelope. He said that Spencer was exercising his parental rights and requesting the return of his minor children. He said that if I did not cooperate, they would be pursuing emergency custody relief through the courts, and that my 11 years of informal care, his word, informal, did not override Spencer's rights as a biological parent. I said, "Spencer, you have not spoken to these children in over 6 years. He looked at the ground. Cheryl put her hand on his arm. I told them to leave my property. Bassett said that if I did not comply voluntarily, the matter would be escalated. I went inside and locked the door. That night I called Gord. He drove up from Salmon Arm the next morning. I want to say clearly I knew Spencer had legal rights as the biological parent. I was not naive about that. But what I also knew, from the court documents I had kept in a binder on my shelf for 11 years, was that his rights had been formally suspended in year 3 when the BC Ministry of Children and Family Development opened a file on him in connection with a drug-related incident in Prince George. I had been granted temporary custody at that point. The file was supposed to be reviewed annually. It never was, not formally, but the order had never been rescinded either. I called a family lawyer in Kamloops the next morning. Her name was Miss Petrov, and she was exactly the kind of person you want in your corner. Small, quiet, and absolutely relentless. She looked at my binder and said, "This is good. This is very good." But before Miss Petrov could file anything, Spencer went to the RCMP. I found out later he had gone to the detachment on Battle Street and told them that his father had been withholding his children from him without legal authority. He did not mention the ministry file. He did not mention the custody order. He said I had taken the children without consent and refused to return them. 2 officers came to my house on a Tuesday afternoon. Eli was at school. Rosie was in the kitchen doing homework. I answered the door, and the officers told me I was being asked to come to the detachment for questioning in relation to a complaint filed by my son. I asked if I was being arrested. They said no. I asked if I could call my lawyer. They said yes. I called Ms. Petrov, and then I told Rosie I had to step out briefly, that everything was fine, that she should text me when Eli got home. She looked at me with those eyes that miss nothing and said, "Grandpa, what's happening?" I said, "Something that is going to be okay." I was at the detachment for 4 hours. The officers were not unkind, but they were also not inclined to just take my word for things. They had Spencer's complaint in front of them, and I had a binder I had grabbed on my way out the door. I showed them the custody documentation. One of the officers, a younger woman, read through it carefully and then left the room for 20 minutes. When she came back, she said they needed to verify some things and that I was free to go for now. For now, those 2 words stayed with me the whole drive home. What I found out later, what Ms. Petrov found out, was that Spencer's wife, Cheryl, came from money. Real money. Her family owned commercial property in Calgary and Kelowna, and her father had passed the previous year, leaving a substantial estate. Spencer had, apparently, told Cheryl some version of the story of his children. The version where I had interfered. The version where he had tried to stay involved. The version where he was the one who had been wronged. And Cheryl, who I will say this much for, clearly loved Spencer and believed him, had funded this whole effort. The lawyer, the trip to Kamloops, all of it. She wanted to build a family. She did not know the family she was trying to build on a foundation of 11 years of lies. The RCMP came back 3 days later. This time it was different. Bassett had filed paperwork alleging that I had fraudulently obtained custody documentation and that Spencer had never been properly notified of the ministry proceedings. There were also allegations, I could barely read them, that I had encouraged the children to reject their father. Parental alienation, Bassett's filing called it. They took me in this time. Not arrested. Detained for questioning. But the optics were clear enough that 2 of my neighbors watched from their driveways as I got into the back of that police car. I called Gord from the detachment. I told him what was happening. I told him there was a second binder at my house, the one I kept in the locked drawer in my bedroom, that had everything in it. The original note Spencer left. The call logs I had printed from my phone provider going back to year 4, showing exactly when communication stopped. The letter from the ministry caseworker in year 3. A letter Spencer had written me from Prince George in year 6, which I had never shown anyone, in which he asked me to please look after the kids and said he was not in a position to be their father. That letter was everything. I had kept it because I kept things. I am 67 years old and I have kept things my whole life because you never know. My wife used to tease me about it. She said our filing cabinet was the most organized thing in the province. She was probably right. Gord asked me where the key to the drawer was. I told him it was under the ceramic pot on the back porch, under the fake rock. He said nothing for a moment and then said, "I'm going." I said, "Gord, they might think." He said, "I know what they might think. I'm going." He drove to my house, let himself in through the back with the hide key I had told him about years earlier, unlocked the bedroom drawer, and brought the binder to Ms. Petrov's office. She was waiting for him. I was held for 2 more hours after that. Then Ms. Petrov walked into the detachment with the binder and a very particular look on her face, and within 40 minutes I was released without conditions. The letter from Spencer was dated June 14, 2019. It was handwritten, 4 pages, and it said, in his own words, that he was relinquishing his role as an active parent, that he understood the children were better cared for by me, and that he did not want to be contacted. He had signed it. He had also, for reasons I will never fully understand, dated every page. Spencer's lawyer had not known about the letter. Spencer had apparently believed I would not have kept it, or perhaps he had convinced himself over the years that he had never written it. The RCMP reviewed it. They reviewed the ministry documentation. They interviewed Eli, who was 17 and, as the officer told me afterward, had been completely clear and composed and devastating in his account of the last 11 years. My grandson sat in that room and told them everything, every missed birthday, every Christmas call that didn't come, every time Rosie had asked where her dad was, and I had tried to answer honestly without crushing her. Ellie had not called me from the school to tell me what was happening. He had gone directly to the RCMP office and asked to speak to someone. He had done it on his own. I did not know until it was over. When I found that out, I had to sit down. Spencer's complaint was formally dismissed. Bassett's fraud allegations were referred for review and subsequently dropped. Spencer was cautioned for making a misleading complaint to police. He did not fight the outcome. I think when the letter surfaced, something in him understood it was over. Ms. Petrov told me he and Cheryl left Kamloops the next day. I have not heard from him since. I do not know what he told Cheryl. I do not know if their marriage survived what she learned. I genuinely hope she is all right. She was a victim of his version of the story, the same as anyone. The night it was all over, Gord came for dinner. Rosie made spaghetti, because it is the one thing she makes with complete confidence, and we sat at the kitchen table and ate and did not talk about any of it for a long time. Then Eli said, very quietly, "Is it done?" I said yes. He nodded and went back to his spaghetti. After dinner, Gord and I sat on the back porch with a couple of kokanee and watched the Thompson Hills go dark in the evening light. He did not say anything about going into my house and retrieving the binder while I was detained. He did not say anything about driving 4 hours round trip on a weekday or about any of it. I told him what it meant to me. He said something like, don't start, and handed me another beer. There are things you cannot put a value on. A friend who drives from Salmon Arm without being asked is one of them. I'm not angry at Spencer. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect anger, and I understand why. But what I feel is closer to grief. I grieve the father he could have been to those children. I grieve the relationship we might have had if things had gone differently. I grieve whatever it was in him that made him run instead of stay. But I do not grieve the 11 years, not one day of them. Eli is talking about studying electrical engineering at BCIT next fall. He told me last month, very matter-of-factly, like it was already decided. I told him that sounded exactly right. Rosie wants to be a veterinarian and has been volunteering at the Kamloops Humane Society since she was 13, which tells you everything you need to know about who she is. They are good people. They were always going to be good people, I believe that. But I also believe that what happens around you when you are small matters enormously. Someone had to be there. I happened to be the one. I did not know, 11 years ago, standing in my kitchen in my socks reading that note for the 4th time, that I was at the beginning of the best chapter of my life. I thought I was just making breakfast. But that is how it goes sometimes. I keep thinking about the note Spencer left on my kitchen counter. 2 sentences. I've read it so many times over the years that I could recite it without looking. What strikes me now, more than the words themselves, is what was absent from them. Any mention of the children. Not, please take care of them. Not, I know they'll be safe with you. Just an apology and a signature. That absence told me everything I needed to know about where his head was at, even if I couldn't admit it clearly back then. I don't believe the universe runs on luck. I believe it runs on choices, and the choices compound over time the way interest does. Slowly, quietly, until one day you look at your account and realize you are either very rich or very broke in ways that have nothing to do with money. Spencer made his choices across 11 years. Small ones at first, the missed call, the unanswered message, the Christmas that passed without a word, then larger ones. The letter he wrote me in 2019, the one he apparently convinced himself I would never keep. Every one of those choices was a withdrawal. By the time he walked up my porch steps with a lawyer beside him, the account was empty. And I made my choices too. I kept things, not out of suspicion, I want to be honest about that, but because keeping records was just how I was built. Joanne used to roll her eyes at my filing system, but those binders, those printed call logs, that handwritten letter in the locked drawer, they were not a trap I set. They were just the sediment of a careful life. The truth has a way of surviving when you give it somewhere to live. What I watched Eli become over those 11 years is the thing I am most proud of, not because of anything I specifically taught him, but because of what he chose to do with what he had. He grew up with an absence at the center of his story, the kind of absence that can hollow a person out if they let it. Instead, he learned to build things. He fixed what was broken around him. He showed up for his sister, and when it mattered most, he walked into an RCMP detachment at 17 years old, on his own, and told the truth clearly and completely. That kind of steadiness does not come from nowhere. It comes from a young person deciding, somewhere along the way, that they are going to be the kind of person who does not run. Rosie is the same, just differently. She carries joy the way some people carry armor, openly, deliberately, as if she has decided it is worth protecting. She was 4 years old when she was left at my door. She does not remember it, but somewhere in her, I think she made a choice about how she was going to move through the world anyway. I did not save those children. I want to be careful about that framing because it is not accurate. I fed them and drove them to school and sat with them through hard nights and showed up every single day. That is not salvation. That is just what staying looks like. They saved themselves in the ways that mattered. Gord drove 4 hours on a weekday because that is who he is. That is the whole explanation. Some people, when things get difficult, find reasons to be elsewhere. And some people just say, "Okay, what do you need?" I have tried to be the second kind of person my whole life. I do not always manage it, but I try. That is what I would want anyone to take from this, if they take anything at all. Not a lesson exactly, more like a reminder. The choices you make when no one is watching, the things you keep, the people you stay for, they matter more than you think they do. They have a way of showing up exactly when you need them.